"Len, why is there a strange car in our driveway?" I asked innocently enough, peeking through the living room curtains. An eerie silence fell over the room. Len didn't respond, his face frozen like a deer caught in headlights. "Well?" I pressed, my heartbeat quickening. "Who does that blue Honda belong to?" Len cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his recliner. Must belong to one of the neighbors. You know how people park wherever around here." I furrowed my brow, not buying his excuse for a second, but it's pulled up right against the garage door, and I could have sworn I heard voices coming from the shed. Pushing himself up with a grunt, Len waved his hand dismissively. "You're hearing things, dear. I'm going to run some errands. We're out of milk and... Marching towards the back door, I cut him off. "Not so fast, mister. We're getting to the bottom of this right now." I flung open the door and stepped outside, the hot summer sun beating down. Len reluctantly followed behind as I made a beeline for the shed, steeling myself for what I might find. With a trembling hand, I pulled open the shed door. The sight before me sucked the wind right from my lungs. There she was, a young, attractive woman, frantically pulling her dress back on as she sat on an overturned bucket, her makeup smeared and hair disheveled. A visceral cry escaped my lips as the reality smashed into me like a freight train. My husband of 22 years, the man I thought I knew inside and out, was having an affair. "Marla, I can explain," Len sputtered, rushing over with panic in his eyes. I recoiled from his touch, feeling as though I didn't recognize this man anymore. "Save your lies. How long has this been going on? Who is she?" The woman hurriedly gathered her belongings, the tears flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault," she babbled as she rushed out of the shed, heading straight for her car. "Hey, we're not done here," I shouted after her retreating figure. But it was no use. She peeled out of the driveway in a cloud of dust and squealing tires, leaving me alone with the man I once trusted above all else. Len slumped against the shed and slowly sank to the ground, burying his face in his hands. "Please, let me try to make this right. Kara meant nothing. It was just a stupid fling." "A fling?" I spat, feeling the bile rise in the back of my throat. "We're supposed to be partners, for better or worse. But you've made a mockery of the most sacred vow two people can make. How could you do this to me? To us?" Len opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, silencing him. I couldn't stand to hear any more lies and half-truths at that moment. With tears stinging my eyes, I turned and headed back towards the house, feeling like I didn't recognize this man or my life at all anymore. My world had fallen apart in an instant, and the reality, as ugly and painful as it was, finally came into focus. The sparkling veil of my marriage had been violently ripped away. The life I thought I had was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated illusion. I spent that night lying awake, my mind spinning with a million thoughts as the devastating scene replayed over and over. How could Len, the supposed love of my life, do something so despicable? So cruel? As the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, I turned to look at the empty space on the other side of the bed. Len hadn't come home after storming out of the house the previous day. Truthfully, I wasn't sure I even wanted him back. My head throbbing, I forced myself up and padded into the kitchen, hoping a strong cup of coffee might snap me out of this waking nightmare. The house felt eerily quiet without Len's usual whistling and humming as he got ready for work. I don't know why I allowed myself to be blindsided like this. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. Len's little work dinners that kept getting later and later. The excessive spending and shopping trips he tried to hide. Those work conferences in different cities every few months where he traveled alone. I felt like such a fool for buying into the facade, for believing the lies and half-truths he so expertly fed me for who knows how long. Len Thomas, respected insurance agent, doting father, all-around family man. What a joke that turned out to be. As I took my first tentative sip of coffee, the front door burst open. "Speak of the devil." "Morning, honey," Len hollered in an overly chipper tone as he strolled inside, not a care in the world. He plopped a paper bag from the bakery on the counter and leaned in to give me a peck on the cheek. Recoiling, I nearly spilled my coffee all over him. "Get away from me, you lying snake. Did you really think everything would just blow over after yesterday?" Len took a step back, hands raised in mock surrender. Hey, I said I was sorry. What happened with Kara was a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I slammed my mug down, sloshing the steaming liquid over the rim. Didn't mean anything? You were carrying on an affair behind my back, Len. Not to mention blowing through our life savings on God knows what else with your constant business trips. He shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering for just a moment before the callous mask slipped back into place. Look, I earned that money, so I can spend it however I damn well please. Unbelievable. My blood boiled over as the sheer depth of his narcissism and entitlement hit me. In that moment, it finally became clear this man only cared about himself. He had no concept of respect, loyalty, or commitment. Get out, I growled, fighting back hot tears of anger and humiliation. I couldn't stand to look at him a second longer. Take your syrupy apologies and go straight to hell. Len opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. With a huff, he snatched up his bakery bag and stormed back towards the front door. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, you ungrateful bitch, he shouted over his shoulder on the way out. As the door slammed behind him, the dam finally broke. I slumped against the kitchen counter, sobbing as reality came crashing down in waves. Not only was my marriage over after more than 2 decades, but the man I loved never truly existed. It was all an intricately woven web of lies. In the days and weeks after Len's explosive exit, I found myself slowly unraveling the tangled web of lies he had craftily spun over the years. What began as an isolated incident of infidelity quickly revealed itself to be just the tip of a much larger, more disturbing iceberg. First, there were the money issues. I pored over our bank statements and credit card bills, feeling my anger flare with each new piece of damning evidence. Months of unexplained cash withdrawals and charges at high-end hotels in cities I'd never stepped foot in. Thousands of dollars funneled into an offshore account I never knew existed. Len had been systematically draining our life savings to fund his indulgent double life on the side, all while spinning me fairy tales about the money going towards investments and financial planning for our future. My future certainly didn't include becoming a depressed, penniless divorcee at 45. But as appalling as the fiscal betrayal was, it paled in comparison to what I uncovered next. Proof that Kara from the shed incident was just the beginning of Len's womanizing ways. Stuffed away in his closet, buried under a pile of tacky tourist t-shirts, was a veritable Pandora's box of sordid evidence. Love letters and raunchy photos from at least 3 other mistresses I could identify by name. Crudely scribbled phone numbers and salacious details on scraps of paper, transcripts of messaging apps brimming with explicit exchanges. It made me physically ill to think of how long this repugnant double life had been going on behind my back. The worst part? Mixed among the unsettling artifacts were photos of our son Evan at various ages, baseball games, prom night, his high school graduation. It was as though Len was using memories of his own child to try and paper over the cracks of his infidelity and lies. As enraged as I felt, there was also a sickening undercurrent of pity for Evan. My innocent little boy, who idolized his father, had been so calculatingly manipulated by his own flesh and blood. I steeled my resolve knowing I had to make things right, no matter how difficult or messy it would get. The floodgates of fury truly opened when I discovered Len had been sleeping with one of his co-workers at the insurance agency, Beth Kingsley. Thanks to a fortuitous Vegas trip with the work wives a few years back, I knew Beth all too well as the bubbly, sweet-seeming mom of 3 who fawned all over Len at every office party. Now, I had transcripts explicitly detailing their torrid sexcapades, hotel room trysts, flirty messages, and lurid recaps of their insatiable lust and passion for each other. Worst of all, there was clear evidence Beth had gotten pregnant with Len's child and terminated it in secret to avoid scrutiny and complications. That was the final straw. I had to take action, not just for myself, but for all the other spurned souls damaged by Len's detestable actions. He needed to face true consequences for his reprehensible behavior, not just get shuffled off to his next willing victim. I was through being the naive, demure little wife who turned a blind eye to preserve the fantasy of marital bliss. It was time for Len Thomas to reap what he'd sown. The facade of the perfect family man came crashing down, and I would make sure the whole world saw him for the insidious fraud and cheater he really was. With the full, sickening scope of Len's betrayal now laid bare before me, I felt more alone than ever before. Who could I even trust after being so completely deceived by the person I loved most? I thought about reaching out to my own family for support, but quickly dismissed the idea. My parents were traditional types, the sort who would sooner bury the ugly truth than face it head-on. They'd just tell me to keep quiet, go to counseling, and plaster on a happy face like a good wife. No thank you. As for Len's relatives, I could already hear the dismissive squawks of his overbearing mother, insisting her precious Lenny Bear could do no wrong and that I simply didn't understand the stresses he was under. I didn't need that kind of warped enabling and victim-blaming. So I turned to the only person I knew I could trust implicitly, an old college friend named Claire. Though we'd drifted apart over the years, raising families of our own, Claire and I could always shoot straight with each other. She'd been my maid of honor and staunchest supporter when I got married. Now it was my turn to lean on her strength. "Oh my God, Marla," she gasped after I poured out the whole sordid tale over coffee one rainy afternoon. Tears of outrage pooled in her eyes as she squeezed my hand. "How could that scumbag do something like this? You don't deserve any of this." I gave her a weary shrug, the weight of it all crashing down yet again. "I really don't know, Claire. I'm just so embarrassed and feel like such an idiot." "No," she cut me off firmly. "Do not blame yourself for that bastard's sins. The only one at fault is Len and his rampant disrespect. I'll bet anything he's done this to other poor souls, too." My eyes went wide as the light bulb flickered on. Of course, Len's insatiable appetite for new conquests surely meant I wasn't the only one suffering his deceitful ways. If I could just find others in my position, maybe we could take him down once and for all. Without saying another word, I pulled out my laptop and started furiously typing out messages to ex-classmates, neighbors, fellow military wives, anyone who might potentially cross paths with the charming, yet soulless creep known as Leonard Thomas. Before long, the responses started trickling in. Stories of being cruelly misled, belittled, or pumped for money under the guise of business investments. Some brave women even laid bare their most intimate violations at Len's calloused hands. It made me sick, but also strengthened my resolve for justice tenfold. "You see what a cesspool we've stumbled onto?" I murmured grimly at Claire as we read each new confession. "That sick, twisted man has left a wake of broken lives in his path." Claire pursed her lips, eyes narrowed with fierce determination. "No more. We're going to stop this once and for all." Within days, the trickle had become a flood of outrage and anguish from women near and far, all united by the same experience of being cruelly manipulated by Len Thomas. We formed a network, sharing evidence and stories, building an unshakable case that would ultimately prove Len's guilt beyond any doubt. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel so alone and powerless in the face of such devastating betrayal. As I looked around our ragtag band of survivors, I saw the flickers of hope and resilience igniting within each woman's eyes. We weren't just victims anymore. We were the agents of Len's ultimate reckoning and undoing. And we would have our furious revenge. Our motley crew of wronged women gathered in Claire's basement one chilly autumn evening, the fire crackling as we nursed glasses of red wine and plotted our next moves. "We've got the evidence," Claire stated, her voice steely with determination. "Bank statements, phone records, testimonies, the whole 9 yards of sickening proof against Len and his escapades." Murmurs of assent rippled through the group. A few women shifted uncomfortably on the well-worn couches, haunted looks clouding their eyes. We'd all shared our shocking tales over the past weeks, each seeming more depraved than the last. But how can we make sure he actually faces real consequences this time? Tara, one of the younger members, spoke up hesitantly. She twisted a friendship bracelet around her wrist, a nervous tic I'd noticed whenever she recounted Len's salacious sexual coercion. What's to stop him from just moving on to the next town and starting over like none of this ever happened? A heavy silence fell over the room as we all considered the harsh truth of her words. Len was an expert linguist, fluent in lies, manipulation, and deceit. He could easily slither his way out of any corner we boxed him into, unless we went for the jugular. "We hit him where it hurts most," I said, gripping the arms of my chair. His money, his career, his precious reputation in this community he's toyed with for decades. Nods and murmurs of approval met my suggestion. I could see the fire sparking behind each woman's eyes, burning away the cobwebs of doubt and insecurity that had kept us entangled in Len's web for far too long. We take all our evidence, every incriminating letter, photo, and illicit recording of his misdeeds, and we plaster it on the front pages. We shove it in the faces of his bosses at the insurance firm, his co-workers, our friends and neighbors. We make sure no one in this town can turn a blind eye to the abhorrent reality of who Len Thomas truly is. Smiles grew wider as I spoke, building up momentum. We were no longer powerless, no longer forced to suffer in silent shame while he carried on unchecked. For too long, Len had controlled the narrative, painting himself as the well-intentioned family man while lying straight to our faces. Now it was our turn to dictate the story and expose him for the immoral, self-serving scumbag that he was. We hit up every community gathering, every church social, every public event with our proof, Claire declared, rising to her feet. Let him try and hide or deflect when we bear it all for the world to see. A chorus of cheers and clinking glasses filled the air as the pieces fell into place. We spent the next few hours strategizing and preparing the final steps, channeling our fury and disgust into cold, calculated determination. By the time the last log was consumed by the sputtering fireplace, we had our battle plan traced out to the letter. The stage was set for the ultimate takedown. There would be no more second chances, no more benefit of the doubt for Len Thomas. He'd created this grotesque reality through deeds, lies, and callous disregard for anyone's well-being but his own. And now he would be forced to reckon with the full consequences in front of everyone. I caught my own reflection in the darkened window pane and did a double take. The woman staring back at me was gripped with a ferocious hunger for justice and payback that was both exhilarating and chilling. Len had awoken a merciless force within me, one I never could have imagined existed under the surface. By the time we were through with him, he would know what it felt like to have his life ripped apart by deceit and betrayal. There would be no escape, no reset button to salve his constantly growing trail of destruction. He'd made his choices, and now the world would see them laid bare for what they truly were. The annual Oakwood Community Fundraiser was always a big to-do in our little suburb. A full day of food trucks, games, music, and mingling, all in the name of supporting local schools and charities. A week ago, I would have been front and center helping to organize it all as I did every year. But today, my sole focus was ensuring Len's reckoning played out on the biggest stage possible in front of everyone he'd spent decades deceiving. "Are you ladies ready?" Claire asked in a low voice as we clustered behind the main pavilion, sending a final flurry of messages on our phones. "This is our one shot to pull this off." I took a deep, steadying breath, looking around at the determined faces surrounding me. Pamela, a lawyer's wife who loaned us the projector we'd be using. Kendall, who printed out hundreds of flyers outlining the ugly particulars of Len's transgressions. Jessica, whose tech expertise would ensure our video evidence played without a hitch. We were a united front, an army of the wronged who had been pushed too far, trampled on by one man's bottomless pit of narcissism and infidelity. Today the debt would finally be paid. "Let's do this," I said with a grim nod. Our plan was simple, yet brutal. First, we would circulate through the crowd and hand out flyers detailing the tip of the iceberg. Len's affairs, lies about his work obligations, the mistress he was canoodling with in our very own backyard. Let the gossip and whispers reach a fevered pitch. Then, once enough eyes were focused on the main stage, we'd hijack the AV setup under the guise of an important community safety message and unload the full bombshell. Videos, emails, chat logs, phone records, hard evidence of Len's depraved manipulation, gaslighting, and financial treachery spanning years. The receipts, as the kids call them. Finally, once the proverbial bomb had been detonated, Pamela would take the stage and invite every last one of Len's victims to bravely share their unvarnished stories. No more secrets. No more carefully curated veneers. This was about laying it all out in the harsh light of day, no matter how ugly it got. I felt my stomach churning as our group dispersed, Kendall and Jessica taking their posts handing out the flyers. Deep breaths. You can do this, Marla. Striding towards the entrance with more confidence than I actually felt, I caught sight of my target. Len perched at one of the beer gardens, his arm draped idly around a young, overly made-up woman I didn't recognize. Of course, he just couldn't help himself, even after the devastation his actions had wrought. Seething, I shoved the incriminating flyers towards him, practically snarling as I spoke through gritted teeth. You should really take a look at these, Len. He glanced down at the damning evidence splayed before him, his face quickly draining of color. What the hell is this? Your reckoning, I spat back, wheeling away before he could respond. As I stalked back towards the staging area, I could already feel the rumbles of shock and outrage rippling through the crowds. The tendrils of doubt about Len's true nature were rapidly spreading through every nook and cranny like insidious vines, and that was before the full reveal. By the time we hijacked the AV system, Pamela's stern baritone voice ringing out over the speakers, hundreds of eyes were already locked on the towering projection screens. Neighbors, co-workers, parents of our kids' friends, they all watched in stunned silence as a cavalcade of incriminating videos and evidence poured forth. Len's confidently barking orders at his mistress during a dirty video chat, right alongside timecodes proving he was on a business trip at the time. Itemized statements showing thousands siphoned into private accounts to fund his sex vacations and indulgences. A frantic string of texts from Beth, one of his co-workers, describing her fears about being pregnant, and the haunting follow-ups where she despaired over having an abortion to avoid being found out. The floodgates of truth and consequences had burst wide open, and there was no turning back now. As the soul-crushing revelations spilled out one by one, I scanned the crowd for Len, my jaw clenched when I finally spotted him. Standing alone in an open field, hands jammed into his pockets as the gathered masses' gazes bored directly into him. There would be no fast-talking or smooth avoidance today. The lifetime con man had finally been cornered, and the spotlight of judgment had turned blindingly harsh. The crowd's stunned silence quickly gave way to a deafening roar of shock and outrage as the full breadth of Len's depravity played out on the massive screens. Seeing his most twisted misdeeds projected in high definition was like a bucket of ice water being hurled at our community's collective face. I locked eyes with Len, frozen in the center of that grassy field amidst a sea of accusatory glares and shouts. His smarmy facade of confidence had fully crumbled as the horrifying truth was laid bare before everyone. His mouth hung open, pale and trembling like a cornered rat. In that moment, I almost felt a flicker of pity for the pathetic, hollowed-out shell of a man before me, but it was far too little, far too late for such mercies. That's enough. Pamela's commanding voice boomed over the speakers as she strode onto the stage, her stern expression cutting through the din like a knife. Now that you've all seen the harsh reality of Len Thomas's reprehensible actions and deceptions, I invite those he's directly wronged to come forward and share their stories. The lies end today. There was a weighted pause as Pamela held the microphone out with an unwavering gaze, almost daring anyone to break the suddenly tense silence. After a few harrowing seconds, Claire was the first to make her way up onto the stage, shooting me an encouraging nod. Soon, a trickle became a steady stream of other women ascending the steps. Friends, colleagues, former lovers. Each took turn at the mic, voice shaking yet resolute, as they finally unburdened the trauma and pain Len had inflicted. The theme, as it went on, was clear. Len was a chronic predator who stopped at nothing to feed his endless need for ego and sexual gratification. Tales of infidelity, gaslighting, blocked messages, and ominous threats spilled forth one by one. Financial schemes, hushed-up abortions, blatant lies straight to the faces of loved ones. As the stories piled atop one another like grisly Tetris pieces, there was no denying the overwhelming evidence of Len's unfathomable betrayals. As if the footage wasn't damning enough, Pamela stated at one point, glaring out at Len, who still stood unmoving, hands jammed into his pockets. I think we can all agree that Mr. Thomas has clearly been living a profoundly sick double life at everyone else's expense. Another chorus of howls and furious jeers erupted across the gathered onlookers. I watched with a strange sense of detachment as Len squirmed under their escalating judgment, like the worm who'd finally turned. There would be no smooth-talking way out of this deep, inescapable pit he'd willingly dug for himself over decades of duplicity. "Give it up already, you piece of trash! Get out of our town! Lock his slimy ass up for good!" The epithets and cries for vengeance rained down as people steadily fled the area, utterly repulsed and disgusted by the horrors they'd just seen. Word would spread like wildfire, infecting all corners of our insular little community. Len's smug, congenial mask had been shed, and his true self as a conscienceless manipulator left bare for all to gawk at in stunned revulsion. Even his own employer and co-workers couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. Not after the shocking betrayals and damning evidence we'd painstakingly compiled. By night's end, his office keys, laptop, and credentials were retrieved, and he was barred permanently from setting foot on the insurance agency property. As for his financial deceptions and siphoning our money into private slush funds, it didn't take long for the lawyers, and eventually law enforcement, to swarm in and start connecting those nefarious dots. Everything he'd worked so hard to conceal was now inextricably out in the open, free for due process to take its long overdue course. Within a matter of days, Len found himself being served with divorce papers from my attorney, slapped with lawsuits, charges of fraud, and more from no less than 6 different wronged parties. Just that quickly, his plush yuppie lifestyle was imploding from every conceivable angle, the full weight of his sins coming crashing down upon him. As I watched the karmic tornado steadily consume him from afar, I almost felt nothing. No sense of victory or relief, just emptiness and the creeping realization that the man I'd loved for decades never truly existed at all. Len was gone. Or perhaps he never really was there to begin with. The grand illusion had finally dissipated completely, leaving only the harsh truth as exposed and ugly as it was. But at last there was justice, merciless and inescapable, just as it should be. In the weeks and months following Len's cataclysmic downfall, I found myself adrift, grappling with waves of anger, sadness, relief, and emptiness, all washing over me. 45 years old, newly divorced, with hardly a nest egg to my name, thanks to his financial treachery. How does someone even begin to rebuild their life from such smoldering wreckage? I thought about moving away, putting the devastation of our hometown in the rearview forever. But fleeing wouldn't solve anything. As my new friends helped me realize, true healing could only begin once I confronted the innermost demons and fears that Len had exploited all those years. It started small, reaching out to a therapist who specialized in recovering from narcissistic abuse, leaning on Claire and the other women whose solidarity and friendship had become a lifeline throughout my darkest hours. Reclaiming little indulgences for myself that Len had always criticized or outright denied, like getting my hair done or taking a weekend hiking trip with no schedule or demands. Slowly, achingly, the stranglehold of misery and self-doubt began to loosen ever so slightly. I found moments of levity and self-rediscovery peeking through the fog of anguish and anxiety, a journey of reclaiming my sense of self one tiny step at a time. But nothing prepared me for the heart-rending task of explaining Len's unforgivable betrayal to our son, Evan. The boy, now a grown man of 21 studying at State, had always idolized his father, despite his frequent absences and emotional distance. My heart broke into pieces watching the light of hero worship flicker and die behind his eyes, his shoulders sagging from the weight of 1,000 disillusioning realizations. We spoke in hushed tones over coffee and Danish at that little cafe by his campus apartment as I relayed grim details as gently as I could. His father's serial infidelities and sexual improprieties, callous financial deceptions, the sheer staggering depth of his double life. Evan's face remained impassive and still as a statue as I went on, each seismic revelation sending another fracture through that youthful innocence and optimism I'd always envied so much. "Don't know what to say, Mom," he managed weakly once I'd laid it all bare. His reddened eyes brimmed with tears of confusion, anger, and hurt unlike anything I'd ever seen. To even think my own father could do something so sick and cruel. Reaching across the table, I gave his hand a firm squeeze, believing in my bones that stark, unvarnished honesty was the only way forward from such a catastrophe. "I know, sweetie, and I'm so sorry you've been put through this nightmare, too. Your dad, he was a fundamentally broken person, ruled by his own selfishness. You're one of his victims just as much as me or anyone else." My heart clenched as Evan's lower lip began to tremble, his stoic facade crumbling as hot tears cut tracks down his cheeks. I quickly pulled him into a fierce embrace, cradling his tall frame as sobs racked his body. Not the strong, confident young man laughing at dumb memes just weeks earlier, but a wounded child grappling with the cruel reality that the man he looked up to most was a hollow fraud who valued nobody's life but his own. As I gently rocked him, rubbing soothing circles on his back, I doubled down on my vow from that first fateful day to fiercely protect my son from the caustic emotional poison Len had injected into our family unit. If it took years of dedicated therapy or professional guidance to undo that insidious damage, so be it. No more half-truths or papering over the ugliness to preserve messed-up notions of keeping a happy facade. Evan and I would confront and process every ounce of Len's depravity and betrayal head-on, no matter how painful, until we regained the unshakable bond of trust and support he'd so callously violated with his deceptions. As the now familiar pangs of fury mixed with heartbreak flowed through me again, I gently extricated myself and looked my son squarely in the eyes, cupping his face in my hands. "I promise you, Evan, we're going to get through this together and come out stronger on the other side. That man's evil will not define who we are or how we move forward from here." His brow knit with resolution. He gave a slow but emphatic nod. "You're right, Mom. We'll heal. Just don't ever shut me out again, okay? I need you now more than ever." I pulled him into another fierce hug, feeling more reinvigorated and purposeful than I had in forever, as the first crucial steps of our new beginning started to come into focus, a path by uncompromising truth, no matter how ugly or painful, fully peeling away Len's insidious mask and banishing its withering stain once and for all. A righteous cleansing, not just vengeance for vengeance's sake, but purposeful self-preservation and reclamation of our autonomy. With Evan by my side, I knew our journey would be long and arduous, but no longer would we compromise what was right in the face of such sickening depravities. We were drawing our own map forward this time, scars, emotional wreckage, and all. Our destination was healing, even if the roads were still hidden from view. But one thing was now etched in stone. There would be no more lies, no more shying away from ugly truths. The slate had been wiped brutally clean, and it was time to rebuild something brand new, out of the ashes.
My in-laws caught us completely off guard when they moved in without any prior notice. At first, I thought they were merely delivering a large package, but to my astonishment, they emerged from the front door, stating they had no intention of paying rent or doing any chores. They insisted that we take care of them and demanded the biggest room, expecting us to assist with their move. It was surreal. My father-in-law, Austin, and brother-in-law, Owen, had simply barged in and started giving orders about rearranging things. The situation was so absurd that I couldn't help but chuckle, finding humor in the midst of the chaos. With a grin, I reassured them, "It's totally fine," and promptly called my husband, knowing he would be home soon. I couldn't help but wonder how he would react to this unexpected mess, especially considering that the ones who had mocked me were his own family. As anticipated, my husband arrived home, visibly upset with Austin and Owen. However, he surprised everyone by showing them a document. I couldn't contain my amusement as I watched his father and brother's expressions change, understanding that they had no grounds to stay here without our consent. In the end, the tables turned, and it was I who moved out of the house. My name is Catherine Miller, a 34-year-old remote worker. Due to certain family circumstances, I opted for a job that allowed me to work from home, giving me the flexibility to manage household chores and explore new recipes whenever I pleased. I met my husband, Michael Miller, through a dating app during the peak of a flu outbreak. Despite his frequent business trips, Michael wanted us to live together so I wouldn't feel lonely. We fell in love quickly, and marriage was on our minds. However, my irregular periods made it difficult for us to conceive, leading to emotional struggles. Opening up to Michael brought us closer, and we resolved to face life's challenges together. Our peaceful life was disrupted when Michael's father, Austin Miller, called us, complaining about not receiving greetings from our end. Although Michael had reservations about meeting his father, we decided to visit his parents' home. His reluctance was evident as we prepared to go, his frown deepening with every step. Throughout the journey, Michael's displeasure was palpable. He remained silent, clearly indicating his desire to avoid the impending encounter. I wished I knew the reasons behind his aversion, but he chose not to share. Despite my curiosity, I respected his silence, hoping he would eventually open up and confide in me. As we approached his parents' house, we carried a box of pastries as a gesture of goodwill. Michael's tension was undeniable, reflecting the complex relationship he had with his father. I had anticipated receiving sarcastic remarks, but I mustered the courage and left the house. Stress often gave me stomach aches, a fact not lost on Michael, who looked at me with concern and asked, "Are you okay? Should we do this another time?" "I think I'm fine," I replied, attempting to steady my nerves. "It wouldn't be right if we didn't greet your father, right?" It was the same father who had complained over the phone, and there was an air about him that suggested he wouldn't forgive us easily. The situation felt more troublesome than anything else. Michael, too, seemed to sense the tension and was eager to drive, perhaps to keep himself distracted. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were deep-seated issues at his childhood home. Meeting such a father-in-law could be tiresome, but I never regretted choosing Michael. I cherished the kindness he showed me and his occasional clumsiness. It was these little things that meant the most. Lost in thought, we eventually arrived at Michael's childhood home, which was conveniently close to our apartment. It was within walking distance, just a short stroll away if we ever felt like it. As I entered his house, his father greeted me with a big smile. Michael, on the other hand, gave his father a slight glare as he stepped inside. From a room deeper inside the house, I could hear Michael's raised voice. "You can't just mooch off Dad because you're unemployed and stay at home all day. How old do you even think you are?" "Shut up. What I do isn't any of your business." Owen, Michael's brother, defiantly held his own. To sum up the argument, Owen had been living an unemployed lifestyle since his late 20s, without any valid reason like health issues. It was simply because he felt jobs didn't suit him, while Michael understood the desire for a job that suited one's preferences. It was frustrating to see Owen not even attempting to find one. Their father was no different, constantly bringing home different women and ending relationships time after time. Michael always said there was no way they could be happy living like that. "I'm not here to babysit the two of you. I came to announce that Catherine and I are getting married," Michael declared firmly. Yeah, got it. If you want to brag about being happy, do it somewhere else. I'm good if I can just live with Dad." Owen brushed off the confrontation, deeply engrossed in his video game. Annoyed by the sight, Michael was about to react when we realized his father was looming over us. "Catherine, huh? If you're going to marry Michael, you better be ready to take care of his family. Once you're married to Michael, we're family. You get that?" While that might be true, I didn't think it was mandatory. "While that may be true, I don't think it's mandatory," I replied, trying to stand my ground. "What'd you just say, young lady? You've got some nerve. I'll teach you some respect for your elders." Suddenly, his father raised his voice, and I was snapped back to reality, taken aback. Michael quickly pulled my hand, and we managed to leave the house. Dread washed over me as his father, appearing more like a terrifying monster, began chasing us. There was something deeply unsettling about that family. The fear lingered, even as we attempted to choose an apartment. His father always seemed to beat us to it, deciding for us. To prevent such incidents from recurring, Michael and I decided we needed to move. Thanks to my job in web-related work, I had the flexibility to work from anywhere with just a computer. My job wasn't the issue, but Michael's was. While he enjoyed household chores, he also owned a carpentry business, often traveling for work. Consequently, I ended up handling most of the moving process. There was an inevitability to our situation. but I couldn't shake the feeling that his father and the jobless Owen might visit. Given my knack for bad premonitions turning true, all I could do was hope they wouldn't come. In the meantime, I proceeded with the moving arrangements, taking Michael's opinions into account. I wanted to get everything sorted before they potentially showed up at our house. Once the moving process was done, I was finally able to shift to working from home. There were still a few loose ends, including contacting a representative regarding a web video project I had discussed earlier. While I was engrossed in messaging and talking on the phone, I heard a knock on the front door. Michael usually didn't bother knocking. He would simply walk in. The unexpected visitor puzzled me. Could it be his father and Owen? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. As I contemplated this, a loud, aggressive voice echoed from behind the door. It was his father, Austin. Panic set in. Michael wasn't back yet, which meant I had to handle this situation alone. Perhaps talking to him would resolve things. I ended my call with the client and cautiously approached the front door. The relentless knocking only confirmed my suspicions. It had to be his father. Uncertain of his intentions, but determined to protect our peace, I mustered a polite greeting and opened the door slightly. Before I could react, Owen forcefully pushed the door open, dropping a large bag at the entrance with a satisfied grin. He theatrically collapsed onto a chair, exclaiming, "I'm exhausted." I asked Austin what was going on, and he explained, "We couldn't pay the mortgage on our place, so we sold it and decided to move. Naturally, we won't pay any rent or do any chores, so take care of us." With a self-centered air, both his father and Owen strolled into our apartment. Owen, lugging his baggage, scanned the rooms to decide where he would settle. Meanwhile, his father, after depositing his enormous bag in the living room, began to complain about the room's size. "Come on, this apartment is meant for 2 people, you know. If we're going to have 4 people living here, we might need to find another place." However, Michael and I had already chosen our next home, and our moving date was just around the corner. "I'm going to take the upstairs room," Owen declared, showing no consideration for the situation. "Catherine, can you tidy up this room for me? And haven't you put too much stuff in the living room? There's no space for us to even eat together." I was left utterly speechless by their audacity, as they said whatever pleased them without any regard for courtesy. Deciding that I needed to inform Michael about the situation, I was suddenly startled by the sound of someone punching a wall, most likely out of anger. However, the words that followed provided a small relief, indicating that I might not have to deal with these 2 any longer. Unfortunately, due to work circumstances, Michael couldn't return to the apartment. The burden of handling the situation fell upon me, and as a woman, facing 2 men alone felt unsafe. So, I decided to make a call for help. The person I called was a friend who had previously assisted both Michael and me with our moving preparations. She happened to live in a building constructed by Michael's company, and her name was Olivia Lewis. Olivia was a CEO who owned properties overseas. When I explained the situation to Olivia, she expressed her unease about the father and son in my home. Soon enough, they arrived at our apartment, arrogantly scattering their belongings everywhere. Despite the fact that Michael and I were the rightful owners of the apartment, with me being the leaseholder due to my remote work, they seemed oblivious to the reality. With a gracious smile, I told the 2 clueless men, "That's totally fine. We're moving out of this apartment anyway." His father, appearing desperate, clung to me. I couldn't hide my condescending look as I firmly stated, "Don't cling to me looking so pitiful. It's embarrassing." He was on the verge of tears, trying to reason. "It's a joke, right? Tell me it's a joke." I responded sternly, "It's not a joke, Austin. Michael and I decided this together. There's no way I'd joke about it now." The same man who had been smug about the living room just a while ago was now clinging to me, looking truly pitiable. Owen, puzzled by the scene between his father and me, came downstairs and couldn't believe what he was witnessing. "Dad, are you seriously trying to make a move on Michael's wife? Now that's just unbelievable," Owen remarked. I had a few choice words for Owen, who was making such comments. To begin with, as soon as he arrived at our place, I was infuriated by his audacity in searching for his own room in a house he hadn't even rented. Their actions were beyond my comprehension. If anyone should be saying unbelievable, it's my line. You folks moving into someone else's house is just unbelievable. You didn't even have a lease. What made you think you could just move in and live here? Realizing that I needed assistance in dealing with this situation, I decided to call Olivia, who held considerable authority as both the landlord of an apartment complex and its general manager. Olivia was a respected figure in the area, often referred to as the CEO due to her prominence. There was no way they could talk their way out of this once she arrived. Olivia soon arrived at the parking lot and entered the room. Olivia assessed the situation alongside me and the two men and seemed to grasp the core issue. She decided to contact Michael to address the matter. After a brief conversation with Michael, Olivia appeared to have resolved the issue. Her expression was dead serious as she inquired, "Did you handle the tax declaration after selling your house?" "No, not yet," I admitted. "That's odd. We can't lease you the apartment without that. Please ensure you've reported it correctly, and then we may proceed with this room," Olivia explained, demonstrating a meticulous approach. When dealing with individuals like the ones we were facing, legal knowledge was essential to have a fair conversation. Michael must have been well aware of his father's troublesome nature. His father had a reputation for being self-centered and engaging in extramarital affairs, a story Michael had shared with me before one of his business trips. Michael's mother had left their house after discovering his father's infidelity, and her departure left Michael feeling remorseful. She had even hugged Michael apologetically before leaving, expressing guilt for leaving him in such a household. Michael had then taken over all the household chores. However, his father's philandering behavior only worsened over time, while Owen kept jumping from one job to another before ultimately becoming unemployed around the age of 28. He took pride in receiving unemployment benefits and eventually withdrew from social interaction, feeling overwhelmed. Faced with the daunting task of taking care of Owen and their father, Michael decided to marry me. They were diligent in paying utility bills, but occasionally skipped out on insurance premiums and other minor fees. Michael even worried about being unable to complete the house loan payments. Realizing that they weren't responsible adults, Michael eventually decided it was time to move out. When his father began arguing with Olivia, Michael sent me a message instructing me to intervene. I stepped in between his father and Olivia and calmly stated, "Excuse me, but Michael and I are moving out tomorrow due to some reasons." His father seemed taken aback and asked, "Hey, hold on. What's going on? I didn't hear about this from Michael. Shouldn't he inform his father when he's moving?" I replied, "He said he didn't want to talk to you about it. He thinks it's best to live separately from a philandering, selfish person like you and Owen." To emphasize my point, I showed his father our conversation on WhatsApp, where Michael had voiced his dissatisfaction with his father. Although I had only been a listener, I had gathered a very negative impression of their past actions. Even during our brief interactions, I couldn't help but find it peculiar for his father and Owen to move into our apartment. Based solely on that fact, I had doubts about the reliability of this father and son duo. Olivia interjected during his father's grumbling, explaining, "Even if Catherine leaves, if you, Austin, don't declare the sale of your previous house, you won't be able to rent an apartment in the future." Austin, appearing somewhat baffled, responded, "But I have money on hand. Isn't that enough?" Olivia clarified, "No, it's not just about selling the house and being done, Austin. If you don't declare it, there are penalties. You'll be the one at a loss. Are you okay with that?" Austin reluctantly agreed, acknowledging the point. Olivia's reasoning made sense in the context of real estate transactions. If he had sold the previous house, he would eventually need to report it to the local authorities. Perhaps he hadn't even reported it to the real estate agency, which would be suspicious. Given their lack of research and understanding, it was evident that Austin and Owen had moved into our place without considering the necessary procedures. As I examined the documents Olivia had brought, it was apparent that they didn't comprehend any of it. I had been fielding questions from Austin and Owen about the documents and couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for them to grasp the situation. Michael and I had resided in this apartment for quite some time, and we had taken the initiative to research the necessary procedures. That's why everything went so smoothly for us. There were always pros and cons to everything, and it seemed like common sense to check things out before making such a significant move. Yet they had moved into our place without giving it any thought, which I found highly questionable. The ones acting recklessly were Austin and Owen. In that moment, Olivia decided to issue a warning to the two of them. Please don't assume you can just move into this apartment immediately. I'll check everything thoroughly and get back to you. Then we can decide on the next steps, Olivia said firmly. Owen seemed to understand, sitting quietly and listening. To be on the safe side, I chose to spend the night at my parents' house as the apartment was going to be rented out the next day. I didn't want to sleep with two guys, especially ones who lacked common sense. Considering the risk of getting involved in some mess, I decided to let Michael's father and his brother stay in my apartment. Olivia, whom I got along with at the real estate agency, had suggested it too, indicating there might have been genuine issues. If anything went wrong, it could ruin our moving plans with Michael. I entrusted the situation to Olivia, the real estate agent, and informed Michael to proceed with the preparations for our new place. I stayed in touch with Olivia to check on how the two were doing. Based on her recommendation, the apartment was rented to Michael's father and Owen for just a few days. Olivia needed to verify if they had properly completed the necessary procedures at the real estate agency, and if they had been paying their taxes regarding the house they claimed to have sold. She also had to contact the associated real estate firm. It turned out that not only had they neglected post-sale procedures, but they also hadn't paid their taxes. Moreover, Olivia reported them to the police, suspecting they might have run off with just the sale money, hinting at a potential scam. To be safe, Olivia decided to inform Michael's father and Owen, who were staying in the apartment. If false information was provided to the real estate company, penalties would surely be enforced. They would not only have to pay the taxes, but also face potential penalties. I wondered how much money would be left in the end. According to what I heard from Olivia, it seemed that it might even go into the negative. The reason was that they had only consulted one real estate agency, which had good reviews and word-of-mouth recommendations. They believed the estimate would be the same no matter which agency they asked. Another task they had neglected was the property transfer process. In simple terms, it involved changing the property's name from Michael's father to the new owner. If there was any outstanding mortgage on the house, it should have been paid from the sale. But as expected, they hadn't paid it, turning the situation into a case with interrogations regarding the amount due and possible fraud. What was particularly bad was Michael's father insisting he knew nothing about it. As for Owen, he couldn't return to his old home, and he lost our apartment. He was forced to find a job with housing provided. However, he only had experience being a shut-in and living off his parents. Eventually, my parents took him in, but they made it clear that once he found a job with housing, he had to move out. With some guidance from my parents, it seemed he might secure a job. I hoped Michael's father and Owen would learn to live responsibly. Meanwhile, Michael and I decided to relocate overseas. Michael's hard work had been recognized, and he was offered a project abroad in Spain. However, both of us were Americans who couldn't speak Spanish. We diligently studied, trying to learn basic conversation skills. I wanted to be able to hold everyday conversations as much as possible. More than anything, it was my first time going on a business trip abroad, so there was a part of me that was really excited. Michael's job was overseas, so he started looking at potential homes for us. He kept me updated through messages and calls, always trying to ensure I wasn't anxious. Today, from the airport, I received a call from a worried Michael who was about to fly to Spain. "Are you okay? I know it's been hard because of my dad and brother. I'm totally fine. I'm more excited about living abroad with you," I reassured him. "Good to hear," Michael said, his voice filled with relief. His relief made me happy too. We were now free from those two, and we were going to enjoy our lives. To achieve that, we would keep studying, learn new things, and adapt to our new life. Everything was going to be all right. And so, our life in Spain began. A child came into our lives, and our daily routine changed as a family of three. We cherished our happiness and continued to live strongly every day.
I'll try my best not to make this a word wall. I don't know where to start. This whole situation is embarrassing, and I am just done with it. I've been with my husband for 5 years now. Married for 3. Well, long story short, his mom was always overwhelming and bold with her input on everything, to put it nicely. I genuinely think it's not fair to be mad at your partner for something he didn't do himself. He can't control what his mom do or say. But what's also not fair is him not addressing it when I am clearly uncomfortable or upset, and instead just talking me into brushing it off or going with it. I never nor would I ever have a back and forth with my mother-in-law. Just not worth barking at each other. I always kind of brush it of if it's a snarky comment or if it's a better way to do something in her opinion. I'll just tell her thanks for the suggestion, but we are fine. It's actually true, the saying, when you marry someone, you marry their family. I think the way to handle it is each spouse should keep his side of the family in line, for lack of a better way to say it. I deal with my parents and their shenanigans, and I expected him to do the same. He never did. He always asks me to give her some grace. Well, it's hard when that person is insulting you. For a while now, she has been making comments about how my son doesn't look like my husband when he was a toddler. Basically accusing me of sleeping around. This, rightfully so, upset me. Sorry, my genes are strong, what do I tell you? I was short with my husband because he didn't address how out of pocket and disrespectful this whole thing is. It has been a week since my husband, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, told me that he would be doing a paternity DNA test. Not because he thinks that it's not his son, but to shut his mom up. Yes, exactly what a read. I don't know which one is worse, him accusing me of cheating or this shit. But all I know is this is audacious. I didn't cheat, and I am not concerned one bit about the test results. I wasn't going to stop him from taking a DNA test or whatever, but I just know I don't want to deal with this any longer. I am looking for an apartment, and I talked to a landlord the day after he brought this DNA test thing up. And I've been acting more than normal since. We'll be getting the results in 2 days. I can't wait. He will be also getting divorce papers with that too. I know for a fact he won't see it coming. I try my best to make this whole thing work and manage my relationship with my mother-in-law as gracefully as possible. But thinking about it, it's not just my mother-in-law that's the problem, but how he is handling things is also a problem. And side note, I've never been more glad that I didn't leave my job when I got married. He makes more than enough to take care of the financial side of things. I thought I would get bored. I only have to be on site 2 days per week. Also, I really love my job and the company, so I didn't leave. Best decision I ever made. He is unreliable, to say the least. I know that divorce can be hard on kids, but I experienced the other side. Living with 2 parents that hated each other and violently fought almost all the time is as hard, maybe even harder. They thought that staying together would be good for me and my siblings. Newsflash, it wasn't. It was traumatizing, to say the least. I don't remember, I either read somewhere or maybe my therapist told me that when you fight with your spouse, you shouldn't see it as me vs you. But more like, me and you was the particular situation or problem on hand and try to figure it out. But it's really hard to do so when you start hating that person. I don't want my son to live like that because I tell one thing, I just can't stand my husband anymore. I don't know if this is a weird way of saying it, but I just don't respect him anymore, if that makes sense. I just see an unreliable man, and I know for a fact that our fights won't be the same as before. I would have said what a waste of 5 years, But I have a sweet and smart gremlin now, and having a child really pushes you to be better and to do better, so I can't complain. Update. The day he was supposed to receive the results, I called my father-in-law and invited them to come over that evening. He was working when he got the results. He sent them to me and told me he would talk to his mother to finally put this to rest. I informed him that I had already invited them for this evening, and I am just waiting for my apology before I leave. I asked that he come home so we can talk before they come over. He called, and I basically told him that this is not working for me anymore. I've already talked to an attorney, filed for divorce, and it might be more expensive than a paternity test, but it would be more effective making his mother happy. And no, I don't care that he was working when I told him. I don't think you have either. He left work and came home. Long story short, we had a spectacular fight. He said that I am not thinking about my son, and I am overreacting because it's not like he went behind my back. And if he knew that I was this upset, he wouldn't have done it. But he knew. We fought about it when he brought it up. He just didn't care. When I gave him the divorce papers, he said he's not signing anything, and he'll ask his mother to apologize when his parents arrive and get done with this. Listen, I don't need him to sign it to get a divorce. It would only make things complicated. That's it. His mother said she has nothing to apologize for. She wouldn't apologize for having suspicions. She didn't accuse me of anything, and I can leave if I want to. So that's that. I did leave that night because I wasn't going to get an apology, and he didn't seem to understand that him reinforcing that it's okay for her to meddle is why I want a divorce in the first place. He eventually told his parents he'll be coming over from time to time to check up on them. He is their only child, and not to bother coming over anymore until she apologizes. She wasn't amused. She told me I am taking her son away, and some would take my son too. She is not someone that you can talk to, I'll tell you that much. It's like talking to a wall. All she knows is insulting or being passive-aggressive on a good day. We're not getting a divorce. We talked the day after. He said I can always file for a divorce, but we should at least try couples counseling because he doesn't want to co-parent. Edit. He doesn't want to lose his son, plain and simple. Although it's not like, if we were to get divorced, he wouldn't be able to see his son, but whatever. He did say, when we talked the second time, that he can see how he was wrong, especially knowing his mother. He also mentioned that he'll just shut her down if she meddles this time. But what can I do with just words? I hope he can learn a thing or two on how to deal with his mother in counseling, because she is truly overwhelming. If counseling would help him understand that a couple means two people, not three, and our marriage is a bit crowded right now, that's enough for me. People saying that I am overreacting in my last post made me ask myself, do I actually want a divorce, or am I just mad? I wanted the divorce at the time. It seemed like the only solution. But if counseling would help us, I can try to work things out. I hope this is a good decision. If not, I am not stuck. I'll take my son and leave. I have a friend who got divorced in 20 days, an uncontested divorce. When you were on the same page regarding how things would be divided, including custody, it's a matter of how long the court would take to review and finalize the divorce, and you'll be done. That was my plan. Nonetheless, I am the one working from home, and my son is still so young. It's totally up to him. If he wants to see his son every day when he gets off work, or if he wants to see his son just a couple of times per week. Because I am not tolerating this anymore. Oh, one last thing. People in my last post were debating if paternity tests should be mandatory or not. I thought that from what I wrote, it was clear I didn't cheat, and I have nothing against the paternity test itself. It should be obvious to everyone that it's not fair for the child nor the man to be tricked into living a lie. If he was the one who had suspicions, that's a big deal. We would have talked about why he thinks that, taken the paternity test for his peace of mind, and made sure we can trust each other then move on. All without anyone interfering, let alone requesting the paternity test. Edit 2. Someone asked curious why they asked for the test and why you're so against it. I don't want to assume there was some troubles in the past, but I feel like there's a lot of lead up and information left out here. At this point, I've shared so much that these aren't too many details, I guess. I am not religious. I also dated women at a certain time. She doesn't like that and thinks that me not being religious or not being straight means I have no values or something. She hates that her son married a non-religious person. He is a believer, but he's a non-practicing believer. Either way, his religion or my lack of belief doesn't cause us any problems in our day-to-day life. I hope this clarifies things for you.
I couldn't abandon my mother. I was consumed by worry for my father. Please, can you drive? Take us to the hospital, I implored Bob, desperation lacing my voice. For a moment, Bob just stared at me, but then he nodded. All right, he said, and immediately began preparing himself. Thank you, I murmured, my relief palpable. Swiftly, I readied myself, and together, we set out towards the hospital in Bob's car. As we ventured deeper into the woods, something seemed awry with the car. I'm sorry, but can you get out and check the front tire? Bob requested. Obliging, I stepped out, shutting the passenger door behind me. But to my bewilderment, as I inspected the tire, Bob started the car without letting me back in. He pulled the vehicle over to the opposite lane, hurriedly approached me, and tossed my bag at me through the open window. That's for waking me up in the middle of the night. He sneered before speeding away, disappearing from sight in no time. 2 hours later, I arrived at the hospital, my heart pounding with fear. There, I found Bob critically injured. My name is Catherine Thompson, 24 years old, a housewife. After college, I had joined a major corporation, but I resigned after marrying a senior colleague, Bob. Bob was not only handsome and intelligent, but also an all-around athlete, every girl's dream man. My initial feelings for him were akin to a fan's adoration for a celebrity, thrilled by his presence in the office and any interaction with him. Unexpectedly, Bob approached me one day after I was assigned to the administrative department. Our relationship escalated from work-related conversations to dating, and soon after, we were married. I had always wondered why he had chosen me. When I asked him, he simply said, "Because you loved me the most," making my heart swell with joy. However, after our marriage, a discomfort settled in. Bob became increasingly critical, chastising me for trivial matters like overcooking eggs or not responding to messages promptly. He'd quizzed me on complex subjects, always pointing out my flaws with a calm yet condescending demeanor. I found myself walking on eggshells, trying desperately to meet his ever-changing standards, hoping to avoid his disapproval. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of my ordeal. All I could think about was avoiding Bob's scolding. It had become my sole preoccupation. However, as exhaustion wore me down, Bob would interject, his tone laced with dissatisfaction. You know, Catherine, appearances do matter. Lately, you look perpetually tired. What would people think? You should always present yourself at your best as my wife, he'd admonish. He insisted on buying me expensive clothes, makeup, and spa treatments. Ironically, the one thing I didn't need to worry about was money, thanks to Bob's wealth. I strained my nerves to meet his demands, trying to enhance my appearance. Consequently, people around me would shower me with compliments like, "Catherine, you have such a wonderful husband. I'm so envious. I wish I could have married someone like Bob. How I wish I could trade places with you." From their perspective, I understood their envy, but the reality was a living nightmare. Desperately following Bob's orders, 2 years passed. Underneath my smiling facade, I was slowly losing myself. Then, one late night, my smartphone rang, snapping me from my momentary escape into a dream world back to harsh reality. Glancing at Bob, who was sleeping next to me, I answered the call. It was my mom, her voice filled with distress. "Catherine, your father." She choked out between sobs. Dad had had a heart attack and was undergoing surgery. What? Dad? I exclaimed, my heart racing. Okay, I got it. I'm on my way. I hung up and turned to Bob, trying to keep my voice steady. What's going on at this hour? I asked. The clock showed it was well past 1 a.m. Sorry, but I explained the situation, desperation coloring my words. I need to go to the hospital. Can you drive me there? Bob stared at me in silence for what felt like an eternity. It was a critical moment for my father. Surely, even Bob would agree to drive. Although I had a driver's license, I wasn't allowed to drive Bob's car. I can't leave my mom alone. I'm worried about Dad. Can you please drive? Take me to the hospital. After what seemed like an endless pause, Bob finally relented. All right, he muttered and began to get dressed. Thank you, I said, gratitude washing over me. I quickly prepared myself, and soon we were on our way to the hospital in Bob's car. The hospital was only about 7 to 8 miles away, a mere 10 to 15 minutes drive by car. The main road offered a direct route to the hospital, but Bob chose to take a detour onto a side road, claiming it was faster because it was the middle of the night. I'm grateful you're trying to get me there quickly, I said, appreciating his concern. Despite his harshness, I believed deep down that he cared for me. After driving down the side road for a while, we entered a wooded area. I remembered Bob mentioning that this route was more scenic during our drives. Suddenly, Bob stopped the car, and I got out as he requested, closing the passenger door behind me. But then, to my shock, Bob started the car without me inside. It moved a short distance forward, then reversed, turned around, and came back to where I stood, utterly bewildered. I had a crucial presentation scheduled for the next day, and here I was, abruptly awakened at this ungodly hour. Bob had parked on the opposite lane, and he hurried toward me, hurling my bag through the open window. This is your punishment for waking me up in the middle of the night, he sneered in a chilling tone before driving off in the same direction. In the dim light of the forest, it was almost surreal how swiftly he vanished from sight. The location was within a not-so-deep forest, and the clock was inching towards 2 a.m. Most people might have felt helpless or even broken down in such a situation, but oddly, I felt a strange sense of relief. I kept walking straight toward the hospital, a distance of about 6 miles. All I could think about was reaching my parents as quickly as possible. Bob's angry face was the last thing on my mind. When he'd thrown that bag at me, I had nearly broken down in tears, wondering what I had done to deserve such treatment. But in my confusion, Bob's words echoed in my mind. It's punishment for waking me up in the middle of the night. If it were some trivial reason, it would be my fault. But what if my father-in-law was in critical condition, undergoing emergency surgery, and my mother-in-law was anxiously waiting? Bob seemed utterly indifferent to my need to be with them. His actions were far from normal. I had once imagined Bob as a prince from a fairy tale, living a dream by marrying him. But that dream had transformed into a nightmare. The real-life prince turned out to be selfish, admitting he married me because I was his biggest admirer, an easy person to manipulate. I had believed I was loved and chosen by him, striving to be a good wife. But now I no longer cared. In that forest, I found my freedom. I couldn't go back to that cage, nor did I have any intention to. As I walked hastily through the forest, my mind was filled with thoughts of liberation from the superficiality of Bob's existence. After about 2 hours of walking, I finally reached the hospital. I informed the staff at the emergency entrance about my father, who had been brought in by an ambulance and was undergoing surgery. After verifying my details, they handed me a visitor's badge, which I wore around my neck. In the dimly lit corridor, the sound of my heels clicking on the floor was the only noise. 2 hours had passed since my arrival, and my anxiety grew. I wondered how my dad was faring and how my mom was holding up. My pace quickened naturally. After turning a few corners, I saw my mom sitting under a dim light on the sofa. "Mom?" I called out, and she looked up, tears streaming down her face. An unsettling feeling settled in my chest. Is something wrong with Dad? I asked, sitting down next to her. No, no, she reassured me. I just felt relieved seeing your face. Your dad is still in surgery. You startled me. A surge of blood rushed from my heart, draining me of all strength. After what felt like an eternity, the lights in the operating room finally dimmed. The surgeon emerged, delivering the news we desperately awaited. The operation had been successful. Although it would take time for my father's condition to stabilize, the immediate danger had passed. My mother and I cried tears of relief together. In the solemn corridors of the hospital, we followed as my father was transferred to the ICU on a stretcher, his face peaceful in slumber. There was nothing more we could do but wait for him to wake up and recover. It was essential to ensure my mother got some rest. I couldn't help but feel anger at Bob, thinking about the lonely hours my mother had endured before my arrival. I led my mother to the vending machine area, buying her a warm tea. Here, drink this to calm down, I said, handing her the cup. Thank you, she said, sipping her coffee. Her calmness brought me a sense of relief too. We sat in the coffee area, the soft glow of dawn illuminating our surroundings. Suddenly, a nurse approached us. Excuse me, are you Catherine Thompson, Bob Thompson's wife? She inquired. I nodded in confirmation. She explained that my husband had been brought in around 2 a.m. the previous night, and they had been trying to contact me without success. I hastily checked my phone, realizing I had muted it, thinking I'd be at the hospital shortly. There were several missed calls from an unknown number, which turned out to be the hospital's. Bob had provided both our home and mobile numbers, expecting me to follow him home. He likely never anticipated that I would walk over 6 miles alone to the hospital through the woods. I explained my father's situation and apologized for missing the calls. The nurse then updated me about Bob. After leaving me behind, he had an accident on his way home. Both his legs were broken, and he needed surgery. I asked my mother to wait and went to see him. The nurse led me to the room where Bob lay, his legs immobilized, looking pitiful. He tried to speak, realizing I wasn't alone. I'm sorry for putting you through this, especially with your father in such a state. I'm glad you came, he said, offering an apologetic smile. As the nurse left, Bob's tone changed. Where the hell have you been? Why didn't you answer the phone right away? He demanded, accusatory. Where you think? You told me my father had surgery. Obviously, I was at the hospital, I replied, my voice laced with defiance. Bob seemed genuinely shocked by my response. What's with that tone? Haven't I always told you to speak politely and gracefully? I won't tolerate such language, he chastised, attempting to regain control. Why should I be polite to someone who deceived me and left me in a forest in the middle of the night? I don't feel the need to show such consideration, I said, my voice firm. I don't have a master anymore. I reclaimed myself in that forest, I declared confidently, asserting my newfound freedom. I stood my ground, proclaiming my freedom, and Bob's face twisted with invisible anger. Is that what someone who's been taken care of should say? He retorted defiantly. Well, is that what someone who's been cared for should say? I shot back, my words laced with a newfound confidence. Bob jerked in shock, causing pain in his immobilized legs, and he let out a cry of pain. I looked down at him coldly, his face contorted in agony and drenched in sweat. Guess you got what was coming to you, I said, a chuckle escaping me naturally after my words. I laughed, and Bob cried, roles reversed. What's so funny? It's all your fault I'm in this mess. Don't you feel guilty? Bob's voice was tearful yet defiant. My fault? No, I think it's someone who left his wife in a forest and hurried home. Serves you right, I countered, my tone unyielding. Bob looked at me in disbelief, shock and fear reflecting in his eyes. His once obedient wife, who had admired him, was now confronting him with icy words and glances, as if he were a stranger. He seemed disturbed, his eyes darting around the room. I realized he was just a small, insignificant man. I felt a sense of shame for having feared and submitted to him for so long. We should break up, I spoke firmly. "I don't see any point in being married to you anymore. I'll wait until you're discharged from the hospital, so please prepare yourself. In the meantime, I'll pack up our stuff at home. Don't be ridiculous. I'm never going to leave you. Do you realize how much time and effort I've put into this relationship?" Bob protested, his voice breaking as he moved. "Do you have anything else to say? If you do, now's the time. What will it be?" I challenged him, but Bob continued to cry, unable to respond. "Nothing then. All right, I have to go care for my father. Take care and goodbye," I said, leaving the room, Bob groaning in pain. Later that day, my father woke up, and we held hands, tears of joy streaming down our faces. Although he still had a way to go in his recovery, it was a relief to know he was stable. I returned to my family home with my mom and shared my decision to divorce Bob. Initially shocked, my mother nodded in silence after hearing my side of the story and welcomed me back home. She had never imagined her daughter, whom she believed was living happily, was being treated so poorly. I cried at her understanding, and for making them worry, weeping until I began preparations for the next step. First, I started looking for a lawyer experienced in divorce cases, which proved surprisingly easy due to a friend's connection in a law firm. I met with a few lawyers and decided on a female attorney who had helped many women like me suffering from emotional abuse. I gained an experienced and powerful ally. Just when Bob was in the hospital, I organized my belongings and prepared to leave the house. The challenge was to prove Bob's fault, which surprisingly turned out to be easy. When Bob had an accident and was questioned by the police, he told them I had an accident on my way back from dropping off my wife at the hospital where she wanted to be with her father, who was undergoing an emergency operation. However, his story seemed off. After all, I arrived at the hospital 2 hours after Bob's accident. When asked where he was and what he was doing during that time, I honestly told them everything, including being abandoned in the forest late at night. At first, the police were shocked, but as they listened, they began to suspect it was malicious abandonment. Many people, not just the police, but also those involved with insurance, his company, and others, eventually found out the truth. Every time Bob made mistakes, I was grateful. In this way, I was able to prove how much Bob had belittled, neglected, and hurt me during our 2-year marriage. He was deemed at fault due to emotional abuse, although it was a short marriage of only 2 years, and I never had to worry about finances. I was able to secure a satisfactory amount in alimony and divorced Bob. After the divorce, I returned to my family home and took care of my father for a while. Fortunately, my father's recovery was smoother than expected, and he seemed to be getting back to his regular life without any lingering effects. His workplace even told him he could return after a brief hiatus, and he was deeply grateful for that stroke of luck. Luckily, I got a job at the law firm that assisted me during my divorce. Thanks to a friend's recommendation and the lawyer who had seen my true nature during my interactions with Bob, the hiring process went smoothly. Thus, our family of 3 was slowly moving forward. Bob had completely lost his trustworthiness since our divorce. No matter how good-looking or elite he might be, he was now recognized as a terrible person who couldn't treat others properly. It seemed like no one wanted anything to do with him anymore. A former colleague reached out, wanting to talk. Apparently, after Bob recovered from his injuries and returned to work, he was spreading the story that I was a terrible woman who abandoned him when he was injured. Despite many people already knowing the real reason for our divorce, I was astounded at how much he underestimated me. So, I asked my lawyer to send him a formal notice threatening to sue for defamation if he didn't correct his story. My friends also shared the real story, and those who were about to believe Bob's version now recognized him as a lying emotional abuser. Well, he still seemed to have his job because he was competent, but I wondered how long he could keep it up in such a hostile environment. Right now, I wasn't ready to look for someone new, but I wanted to find someone who truly cared for me next time. I wanted to show my parents a genuinely happy version of myself. For that day, I would keep my head held high and continue moving forward. I was looking forward to a fun trip with my girlfriends, using your card, when out of the blue, I received a call from Brian. I had already noticed his suspicious behavior, coming home late, secretive phone conversations with Nicole, and restlessness around the house. Was he plotting something with her all along? My suspicion that he might have teamed up with Nicole for some scheme seemed to be coming true. Luckily, I was prepared for such a situation. When Brian mentioned the trip, I decided to feign surprise. Mine, huh? What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my composure as I prodded him to explain. The truth was, I already knew he was leaving for the trip today. Frankly, I found it unbelievable that he thought he could pull a fast one on me without planning it better. I had been patient with everything until that moment. However, now all I felt was a burning desire to get back at him. I had a revenge plan ready. It was about time we fought back against those insufferable siblings, especially considering all the patience we have shown over the years. I hoped they were enjoying their trip, completely unaware that one of their fellow travelers was on my side. My name is Pamela Smith, and I'm 33 years old, living with my husband Brian. I started working at my current company right after high school and climbed the corporate ladder through hard work and determination. Having acquired several certifications and a proven track record, I earned my position as a lead at the young age of 21. Despite my relative youth, I was Brian's superior at work. I was tasked with training Brian and two others when they joined the company. Despite being close in age, I was their supervisor. Brian often complimented my dedication and ambition. Over time, our professional relationship turned into a romantic one. Despite my initial reservations, I fell for him, and our relationship became typical: dinners, drives, and eventually moving in together. However, after moving in, I noticed Brian's sloppiness. I brushed it off, thinking he was comfortable enough with me to be himself. When he proposed, we discussed our future. He expressed his desire for me to quit my job and become a stay-at-home wife, managing the house and raising kids. While I didn't mind the idea, I was concerned about finances. I wanted to keep working and be flexible, especially if we were to buy a house. Our different views on finances and future plans created tension in our relationship, making me question his intentions further. We decided to discuss my job situation, and I reluctantly agreed. I didn't really want to quit my job, but I felt it was necessary to suggest it, or Brian might keep pushing the issue indefinitely. Before our wedding, we held an engagement party with both our families. It was there that I met Brian's sister, Nicole, for the first time. She barged into the bride and groom's waiting room without knocking, sized me up, snickered, and said, "So this is who Brian chose. A bit plain compared to his past choices, huh? Oh, I'm Nicole, your sister-in-law. I'm the type who doesn't hold back with family, so heads up." I stammered, I'm Pamela. Nice to meet you," as Nicole waved her hand dismissively and left the room. Her upfront attitude left me stunned, but it became clear that Nicole was quite the character. Later, I greeted Nicole's husband, who seemed like a decent guy. The wedding went off without a hitch, and Brian and I purchased a house we both liked. With the prospect of a busy life ahead, I put more energy into my work. One ordinary day off, the doorbell unexpectedly rang. Since I was occupied, I asked Brian to answer it. He returned, chatting and laughing, and I found out that Nicole had dropped by. "Pamela, hey there. Brian's doing pretty well, huh? Owning such a big house, good for him. After all, he's my little brother, right?" Nicole remarked. Brian played up his achievements since he probably told his sister that he had bought the house himself. I had contributed to the down payment and mortgage payments, but Brian insisted on having his name on the title. Since we were living together, I thought it didn't matter whose name was on the title, but the way he explained it to his sister annoyed me. I decided to hold my tongue and not make a scene. "I've got some snacks. Brian works really hard, you know," I said, trying to be polite. Nicole commented, "Why does Pamela sound so bossy? She's not the boss or anything." Brian chimed in, "Well, I am Pamela's supervisor at work." Nicole seemed surprised. "Oh, that's right. Did I not mention that?" Nicole then took an unexpected turn, saying, "When I started the job, Pamela was already a manager. Since she started working right after dropping out of high school, it couldn't be helped. If it were me, I'd surpass her in no time." I was taken aback and replied, "Wait, you dropped out of high school? You look so serious, and yet you're less accomplished than me." Nicole shrugged it off, saying, "Is there a problem just because I dropped out of high school?" Brian interjected, "No, not really. But Pamela, since you didn't graduate from high school, and I'm your sister-in-law, I can ask you for anything, right?" I couldn't fathom the logic of their conversation. I asked, "That's true, Pamela. Whatever my sister says is the final word. If you refuse, I'll kick you out of the house." I struggled to comprehend the bizarre situation. Why was my lack of a high school diploma suddenly relevant? And why would refusing my sister-in-law's demands lead to eviction? I offered a polite smile and quickly retreated to the kitchen, overhearing Brian's discussion with his sister, which appeared to be a serious one. Afterward, Nicole approached me and said, "Pamela, I've got a favor to ask. I need to borrow some money, like $5,000. Please." I couldn't help but react. "How is that a little money? That's a lot. What do you need it for anyway?" Nicole insisted, "Come on, it's just $5,000. You're a supervisor, right? You must have a good salary." I sighed, realizing that this situation was getting even more complicated than I had anticipated. I found myself in a situation where I needed to cover the remaining renovation costs. "Didn't you just brag about your new condo the other day?" I asked Nicole, my sister-in-law. She replied casually, "Oh, did I? Anyway, Brian said he'd lend it to me and told me to ask you." I was taken aback. "What? Why would he decide that without asking me?" I questioned. Nicole's tone turned threatening. "Listen, Pamela, either give me the money or I'll call the boss right now and tell him you want to quit. Which one do you prefer?" Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed, but I set a condition. "I'll lend you the money, Nicole, but on one condition. We need to draw up a promissory note." Nicole grumbled. "What? Even though we're family? I want it in writing. So when you come to get the money, make sure to bring your ID with a picture, okay?" The next day, Nicole reluctantly complied with my request, bringing all the necessary documentation. However, as the days passed, I realized how spoiled Brian was by his sister. Nicole used the money I lent her to buy designer items, and soon, she started asking for more. Without any hesitation, each time, I made her sign a promissory note. A month later, I received an unexpected promotion at work. I was ecstatic about becoming the department manager, a step closer to my goal of becoming the head manager. I rushed home to share the news with Brian, who had taken the day off. Excitedly, I exclaimed, "Brian, guess what? Today my boss offered me the position of department manager. I've always wanted this, and now I'm getting closer to my goal." Brian's reaction was far from what I expected. He was furious. "Wait, what? Pamela, you're getting promoted? I don't understand. Did you accept the offer?" "Well, yeah, I've told you about my goal before, right?" I defended myself, trying to make him understand my perspective. His anger escalated. "Hold on. You should have asked for my permission before making such a decision. What were you thinking? Plus, I've told you I wanted you to be a stay-at-home wife, haven't I? How come you're getting promoted and I'm still stuck at the same position? Doesn't that seem odd?" Brian made a call, and shortly after, Nicole arrived. Accusing me of stealing Brian's opportunity, she mocked me, saying, "I heard you stole Brian's promotion opportunity. What's the big idea?" "No, I didn't steal anything. At our company, promotions are based on performance." Brian sided with his sister, questioning my competence at my job. Feeling overwhelmed, I tried to resist, but they restrained me. Together, they rummaged through my purse, taking my bank card. Their laughter echoed in my ears as they left. Tears welled up in my eyes. Regret gnawed at my heart. It was clear that I had made a terrible mistake marrying Brian. As the realization dawned on me, I knew I needed to find a good divorce lawyer. That night, Brian didn't come home, And the next day, he shamelessly flaunted the extravagant expenses he had incurred using my money. The situation had reached a breaking point, and I knew I needed to take control of my life once and for all. I clenched my fists, suppressing the urge to snap back at Brian, especially when more employees began pouring into the office. On my way home, I checked my bank account and was shocked to find that $8,000 had been withdrawn. Once I confronted Brian about it, I couldn't contain my frustration. Brian, what were you thinking? Taking out $8,000 for fancy barbecues and luxurious bars. That money is what I had saved from my single days. And now you've spent it without even discussing it with me. His response was infuriating. It's my money, and I've already spent it. Can't do anything about it now, he said dismissively before retreating to the bathroom. In that moment, I made up my mind. I was going to divorce him. Over the following weeks, I consulted a lawyer, and the divorce preparations were underway. Brian's behavior grew even more suspicious. He started coming home late and rushed out of the house on his days off. My suspicions deepened, and I considered hiring a private investigator. Then, I received an unexpected call from Kevin, Nicole's husband, Brian's sister. Kevin was concerned about Nicole's behavior and mentioned that she had been spending a lot of time at Brian's place, leaving home late and sometimes not returning at all. During our conversation, I shared everything that had happened, including the money I had lent to Nicole and Brian's reckless spending. Kevin sighed and apologized for his wife's behavior, admitting that he had considered divorce but couldn't take action. When I suggested he use the evidence I had gathered, he hesitated but ultimately agreed to cooperate. We decided to expose their deceit. Kevin informed me that Nicole and Brian might be planning a trip, supported by the brochures and travel club cards he found. We devised a plan together, communicating via text and meticulously preparing for our next steps. 2 weeks later, Brian left the house early one morning, thinking he was fooling us all. Kevin had informed me about his departure, so I was ready. A few hours later, Brian called me, gloating about the trip. "I'm going to have a blast on your card with my sis and friends," he said, thinking he had successfully deceived me. But I was prepared. I decided to act surprised. "Mine? What do you mean?" "Explain," I replied, feigning ignorance. Brian, not realizing his plan was unraveling, elaborated. "We planned this trip ages ago. Kevin was just our backup plan in case something happened." Little did he know, I had my own backup plan. Kevin and I were ready to expose their lies and ensure they faced the consequences of their deceitful actions. "We felt that you've become too arrogant lately and decided it was time to teach you a lesson." "Got it now? You can't stand up to us anymore," Nicole sneered, a hint of superiority in her voice. But I had reached my breaking point. I don't have to tolerate this any longer. I've been patient for so long. A little payback isn't too much to ask for. Brian chimed in, confident. "I don't feel anything anymore, not even a shred of emotion." I challenged him, reminding him of his earlier claim. "Brian, what did you say earlier about your debit card?" He responded, playing his part in their scheme. "I told you about your debit card, right?" "Huh? I have my card in my wallet, though." I checked my wallet, puzzled. "What? What are you talking about? Because here it is." "Wait, what the heck is this?" Brian's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "You just noticed. Slow on the uptake, huh? Didn't you take my old gym membership card from the fitness club I used to go to? It's the same color and same stiffness." I gasped, realizing their trick. "Oh my God, it does say fitness club." But I swear, when I checked it, it was definitely a debit card. Brian revealed their scheme with a smug tone. "Actually, last night, I switched the debit card with the membership card. Seems like you didn't check this morning and just went with it." I felt a mix of disappointment and frustration. So, it was a scheme by Nicole and Brian, huh? I'm so disappointed. Nicole added her piece, trying to maintain her arrogance. "Brian, tough break, huh? Don't get too cocky just because you're my stepsister. Got it? You'll remember this when we get back." Ignoring their taunts, I responded coldly, I won't accept anything but cash. Brian attempted to bribe me, but I stood my ground. Well, we'll see about that. Look forward to it. Ignoring their banter, I hung up the phone and went back to sleep, knowing I had something up my sleeve. Later in the afternoon, my phone rang incessantly. My screen was flooded with missed calls and messages. First, I called my brother-in-law, Kevin, and then answered Brian's call, ready to play my part. Hey, finally. Send the money ASAP, please, Brian pleaded, pretending to be cold. Unfazed, I questioned him. You said Kevin would help, right? Or is he not there? Ryan hesitated before responding. What? Do you know something? Ignoring his question, I kept my tone even. Anyway, it's freezing, and Kevin's not here. Should I clue you in? I decided to reveal my plan. Since you and Nickel teamed up, Kevin and I did too. Simple, right? Now do you get why I entertained you guys for so long on that first call? To buy time. Brian was taken aback, and Kevin. He hopped on another plane and is coming back here. Feeling triumphant, I hung up the phone once I received confirmation that Kevin had boarded the plane. Got it. What's your deal with my husband, huh? Don't tell me you're wrong. We teamed up to get back at you. Now find your own way back. See you. With that, I hung up on Nicole and Brian. Kevin, my brother-in-law, was on his way back, supporting my plan. As soon as Brian and his group returned, they confronted me, their voices rising in anger. Pamela, what the hell were you thinking? Be prepared to move out, okay? Kevin's with you, isn't he? Why did you even come back first? Unbelievable. Are you okay with me leaving you? Apologize. I commanded them sternly, shut it and sit down. Kevin, usually calm, shocked Brian and his companion into silence, making them sit down immediately. The lawyer I had called and handed out his business cards to both of them, leaving them dumbfounded. Kevin and I handed them a stack of papers. As they read through them, their faces turned pale. Brian questioned, "Wait a minute, this mentions property division. You're not saying it's about divorce, are you?" Nicole added, "It's written on mine too. Is this about a divorce? What did I do? Divorce has got to be a joke, right?" Ignoring their confusion, I declared, "I've been recording your daily outbursts, even the call you made from your vacation, Brian. I can't continue like this with you." Brian scoffed. "Hold on, are you sure?" I affirmed I said it, didn't I? "I'm demanding half of the down payment from when we bought the house, the rest of the mortgage, and the repayment of the savings you spent from when I was single." Nickel, you spent the money you borrowed from me and also withdrew from my savings with Brian, right? You're going to repay that. Brian tried to destroy the evidence, stomping on the recorder, while Nickel tore the promissory note into pieces. Despite their attempts, I remained composed. "Oops, indeed, you two don't think things through. Nickel, I have a claim against you too, for spending all the savings and such. Say hi to that guy you got close to at the bar for me." Both of them shamelessly cried, facing the consequences of their actions. I presented my bill to Brian, totaling $115,000, and to Nicole, amounting to $31,000. Kevin, too, demanded $120,000 from Nicole. We settled everything without going to court. Packed and ready, I left the house, ignoring Brian and Nicole's desperate attempts to reconnect. I blocked their contacts and focused on my new life. Later, when passing by my old house, I saw it was up for sale. I had moved into a condo, and my career flourished. I received a promotion to regional director, a position I had always aimed for. Kevin and I maintained a strong friendship, and life felt just right. I'm glad I got divorced. What happened between me and Kevin afterward is a story for another time. I baked a chocolate cake for Emily because she loves chocolate. I asked her, "You like chocolate, don't you, Mom?" But she warned me that eating it might be dangerous for her. My daughter, Jennifer, swapped my cake with Bob's, and I reluctantly took a bite. Jennifer started eating her cake as well. Bob was bragging about reserving the cake a month ago, and how yummy the crushed nuts on top were. Suddenly, he began to choke, turned red, and struggled to breathe. He collapsed on the floor. My name is Emily. I'm 36 years old, and I work for a food inspection company. I live with my husband, who is 2 years older than me, and our 7-year-old daughter, Jennifer. I met Bob in a college club, and after we both got jobs, we started dating and got married 2 years later. A year after our marriage, we had our daughter, Jennifer. She was a late bloomer, starting to walk at the age of 2. We got her checked at various hospitals, but they found no issues. They said it was just individual differences and recommended waiting to see her progress. Bob was initially worried about Jennifer, but eventually became frustrated with her slow progress and began to ignore her. My mother-in-law, Diane, disliked Jennifer, thinking she had a disability, and never held her. Only my father-in-law was affectionate to her, often telling me how unique and wonderful she was, which made me happy. Bob was kind until we got married, but with Jennifer's issues, he became grumpy at home. He would slam tables and stomp loudly on the floor when things didn't go his way, making me scared. Bob's behavior stressed me out, leading to hormonal imbalances and menopause, preventing us from having more children. I remember sobbing with my head buried in the pillow. Bob became harsher, nitpicking about everything from cleaning to cooking. Every complaint was accompanied by a loud noise, and I was constantly jumpy and apologetic. Jennifer watched Bob's tantrums with a puzzled expression, but never seemed scared or cried. Bob treated Jennifer as if she were strange. Jennifer didn't speak much but quickly learned to read. She would focus on reading for hours, even encyclopedias and children's books. I believed she understood complex words. When Jennifer was about to start elementary school, they suggested placing her in a special education class due to her lack of speech. Bob was furious and demanded that it be fixed, storming off to the bedroom. As I held my head in my hands, Jennifer gently patted my back. Diane called the next day, expressing embarrassment at Jennifer attending such a class. Neither Bob nor Diane genuinely cared about Jennifer. It was all about their reputation. After consulting with counselors, school teachers, and municipal officers, Jennifer was placed in regular classes, despite my belief that the special needs class might be a better fit. I couldn't suggest it due to Bob and Diane's objections. When Jennifer started elementary school, I had some free time, and my temp agency offered me a permanent position. The job felt fulfilling compared to the stifling atmosphere at home. When I discussed it with Bob, he hesitated but asked me to take care of the house like before. He wanted help from Diane too. Diane began visiting our house frequently, making sarcastic remarks about the mess and my cleaning habits, which made me more meticulous, but she continued to complain. I endured the bullying from Diane for weeks, but I couldn't handle it anymore. I told her I could manage the house on my own, and she reluctantly agreed to stop coming over. However, right after that, Bob started spending more time at his parents' house. A little later, when Jennifer was in 2nd grade, my father-in-law, who had always been kind to her, suddenly passed away. At the funeral, I found it strange that Bob and Diane occasionally glanced at each other and laughed. It felt odd because funerals are usually sad occasions. With my father-in-law gone, Jennifer lost her only ally, and I felt uneasy. Juggling housework, childcare, and a full-time job had worn me out, and I fell sick with a fever. I asked Bob for help with dinner, but he refused, saying he didn't want to catch a cold from me. He stayed at his parents' house for a whole week. As I started to feel better, I was offered a promotion as a section manager at work. I was thrilled, but it also felt like a heavy burden considering my responsibilities at home. When I talked to Bob about it, he insisted I continue with the household duties and belittled my abilities. The next day, Diane came over to the house and complained about its state, saying it was messy because I didn't put effort into housework. She inspected everything and made me redo tasks like wiping windows and folding laundry. Every time Diane nagged, Jennifer started talking to her. She asked Diane about happiness hormones and explained complex medical concepts, leaving Diane confused and exhausted. On my birthday, Bob returned from a business trip with a cake, the first time he'd ever bought something for me since we got married. He thanked me and said, "Thanks for everything. I love you." I was stunned, wondering what had gotten into him this time. "I'll put this cake in the fridge and we can have it later," Bob said in a sugary sweet way that made me uncomfortable. Jennifer, seeming unhappy about something, took a bottle of water from the fridge, glanced at the cake, and went to her room. So Bob and I decided to eat dinner without her. During the meal, Bob gave me awkward compliments and said he'd help with housework from now on. Although I felt uneasy, I nodded to avoid upsetting him. After dinner, as I was cleaning up, Bob took the cake from the fridge and told me not to worry about it. He served the cake and brought it to the table, which I found a bit creepy. Bob got me a chocolate cake, knowing it was Emily's favorite because I liked chocolate. Feeling uncomfortable being alone with him, I decided to fetch Jennifer and went to her room. She was on my old computer, looking for something urgently. She warned me not to eat the cake, saying, "Trust me, Mom, don't eat it right now." Her desperation convinced me to trust her. Jennifer led me back to the dining room, but when I said we didn't have forks, Bob cheerfully went to get them. That's when Jennifer urgently whispered to me that I'd die if I ate the cake. She quickly switched our slices of cake, and Bob came back with forks, proudly talking about reserving the cake a month in advance and how good it was. Suddenly, Bob started choking, turned red, foamed at the mouth, and collapsed to the floor. It seemed like an allergic reaction. Both Bob and I had buckwheat allergies, but there shouldn't have been any buckwheat in the cake we were eating. Jennifer calmly told me to call 911 and handed me her phone. I followed her instructions and also hit Bob on the back as she told me to do. After I called 911, the ambulance came, and they took Bob to the hospital. He was out of danger after receiving treatment, but they kept him there for a few days as a precaution. I wondered how Jennifer knew something really bad was going to happen. After completing the hospital paperwork, Jennifer showed me a wrapper from buckwheat cookies she found in the trash. She explained that the cake Bob brought home had a half-peeled sticker, and she checked the trash, finding an unfamiliar wrapper online, discovering it contained buckwheat flour. I shuddered, thinking if it weren't for Jennifer, I might have eaten the cake and ended up in the hospital. I thought about calling the police, but Jennifer warned me that reporting it might make me a suspect. She went into Bob's study, searching for clues. She found a notebook detailing the plan, involving my father-in-law and Diane. The note mentioned my birthday, and it became clear they were plotting against me. I clenched the notebook, feeling a mix of anger and fear. Realizing their evil intentions, I vowed not to forgive Bob and Diane. Jennifer comforted me, promising to find evidence and protect me. Despite the lack of concrete proof, she was determined to expose them. Encouraged by her determination, I nodded, ready to fight back, and we both held onto each other's hands tightly. I was determined to protect myself and avenge my father-in-law for Jennifer and me. We planned to confront Bob and Diane. First, we had to lure them to our house. I asked Diane for Bob's favorite recipes, pretending I wanted to cook for him after his hospital stay. She came over, and while I learned the recipes, Jennifer checked her purse and found the buckwheat cookies. Next day, I took one cookie to work for a composition test, using my knowledge from my job at a food inspecting company. A few days later, Bob was discharged from the hospital. I told Diane I was preparing a special dinner for his discharge and asked her to bring Bob. While waiting, Jennifer and I prepared a table full of Bob's favorite dishes. When they arrived, Jennifer greeted them and led them to the table. Bob and Diane enjoyed the meal until they noticed something strange. They found seasoning on the table that matched the one mixed with the buckwheat cookies. They stopped eating, puzzled. I teased them about the seasoning, claiming my father-in-law had told me about it. I asked Jennifer to sprinkle it on their food, but they freaked out, saying it was unknown stuff. I calmly revealed that the seasoning was the same ingredient used in the cake and buckwheat cookies. I showed them documents proving the match and Bob's notebook detailing their sinister plan. They denied it at first, but when confronted with evidence, they confessed. Bob said my father-in-law was in their way, disapproving of their close relationship. To get rid of him, they mixed the cookies into the seasoning, causing his death. Their justifications were selfish, revealing their cruel intentions. I couldn't believe it when Bob and Diane admitted to trying the same dangerous plan on me as they did with my father-in-law. They said I was in their way because I also had a buckwheat allergy. I told them I was going to call the police and submit the evidence. Suddenly, Bob stood up, grabbed the copied notebook, crumpled it, and swallowed it. Diane, Jennifer, and I watched in shock. But Jennifer calmly revealed that it was just a copy, and the real notebook was elsewhere. She had secretly recorded their conversation from the start using a hidden voice recorder under the table. Bob realized their plan had failed, and Diane was furious. Jennifer and I were determined to protect me and bring them to justice. I started calling the police, and both Bob and Diane begged for forgiveness. Jennifer then explained how their plan had many mistakes and wouldn't have worked because Bob was too close to his mother. I covered Jennifer's mouth, and she agreed not to get involved with people like them anymore. When the police arrived, Bob and Diane cried and screamed, making it hard for the officers. The evidence, including the copied notes, the voice recording, and Bob's purchase history of buckwheat cookies, led to their conviction, including the matter with my father-in-law. After their arrest, I divorced Bob, and they lost their homes and income. I set up a memorial for my father-in-law. Jennifer also revealed an IQ test result, showing she had an IQ of 135, which is considered gifted. She transferred to a school for gifted children, where she felt comfortable studying what interested her. Living with Jennifer was joyful and fulfilling. People said I looked younger, my menstrual cycle returned, and I felt happier. Jennifer hugged me often, saying it released oxytocin, the happy hormone. I didn't know where oxytocin came from, but it made us both happy. We decided to live together, keeping our smiles bright. I had a prior commitment with my mom, so my husband handed me $20 from his wallet unexpectedly. Caught off guard by this turn of events, I could only stare blankly as he drove away, leaving his wife in labor to prioritize picking up his own mother for her lessons. Even though his mother had consistently belittled me in the past, I tolerated it for the sake of our unborn child. But in that moment, I realized that someone who neglects their child like this doesn't deserve to be a parent. Despite the increasing pain, I decided to face childbirth alone. My name is Catherine. I married my husband Bob right after graduating from college. We were leading a reasonably happy married life. Bob, 3 years older than me, had been a senior in my college club. He fell for me at first sight when I joined as a freshman. Looking back, I blushed thinking about how passionately he pursued me. When you're young, just the fact that someone is older can make them seem so cool. I reciprocated Bob's advances, and we dated smoothly until my graduation. Even after getting married, Bob was head over heels in love with me, so I was never concerned about him cheating. He always left work on time, headed straight home, and ate the dinner I'd prepared while it was still hot. I heard he bragged about it at work, saying how happy he was, so I figured no woman would approach a man who was so obviously devoted. However, there was a reason I describe our seemingly smooth relationship as reasonably happy. That reason was my mother-in-law. I thought the age-old mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues were things of the past. But the moment she saw me, she frowned and said, "What's up with that hair of yours? Looks like you dumped ink all over it. I bet you dyed it last night in a rush, didn't you? Trying to look pure and innocent? It's embarrassing. Can you leave my son here and just go back home? Honestly, if you knew you were meeting us, you should have taken care of your hair well in advance." When I first visited my in-laws before the wedding, she said this to me, and I was terrified and mortified. As she pointed out, I realized my hair color was too bright the day before, and with Bob's help, I had dyed it black. Embarrassed and frustrated by being seen through like this, I was downcast for a while. I admit my mistake in etiquette, but I wish she had said it a bit more kindly. Being separated from Bob because of my hair color and virtually being kicked out of my in-laws' home on my first visit, Bob called me later and said, "I think Mom was just nervous and came off a bit harsh. She really does like you. Don't worry. She's on board with our marriage and wants you to visit again." At that moment, I was pretty irritated by Bob's nonchalant tone. She insulted me in front of him, he didn't stop her, and now he seemed to be defending her. There was no doubt in my mind that her request for me to visit wasn't genuine. Was she going to force us to live with her after we got married and constantly berate me? However, when I finally took the step to marry Bob, my mother-in-law made no such suggestion. I was relieved, but it was short-lived as she started frequently calling Bob to her home. He's finally done with college, out of state, and got a job back home, and then he gets married all of a sudden. I've been so lonely. Why don't you let Catherine have a break and come stay with me for about a week? When I saw such emails addressed to Bob, I was taken aback. Showing me the message, Bob asked, "What should we do?" Instead of letting him answer, I called my mother-in-law and said, "I really appreciate your concern, but we still have unpacking and paperwork to do. I think it'll be a while before he can take a break. I'm sorry." In response, she nagged, "You can do the unpacking yourself. Don't always rely on my son." I simply nodded and ended the call. She was pretending to care about me, but she just wanted her beloved son by her side. Was there no consideration for a newlywed couple? While I was irritated by my inconsiderate mother-in-law, I was also upset with Bob, who just went along without resisting. My husband says that his mother has always been like this. After she separated from my father-in-law, her overprotectiveness became even more intense. When my husband decided to go to college, she cried and tried to stop him. He somehow convinced her and went on to study. But apparently, they used to communicate via email or phone calls almost every night. He always trusted his mother, who raised him as a single mom, from what I've heard. Their relationship had always been strong, which I respected. It's admirable that he's devoted to his mother, but they're both adults, so there should be some appropriate boundaries. That being said, this has been their norm, and I understand that it's not right to judge another family's dynamics. If it weren't for this, my husband is great with housework and is sincere at his job. I even tried to be understanding for a while. However, it didn't take long for me to question their closeness. One weekend, my usually late-sleeping husband woke up earlier than I did and started preparing to go out. I asked, "Did you have plans to go somewhere today?" To which he replied, "I'm going shopping with Mom, Catherine. You can keep sleeping." That was totally unexpected. Apparently, she wanted to buy some clothes and wanted his opinion, so she asked him to accompany her. This upset me, but I tried to keep calm and said, "Today's our day off together after a long time. Why don't we do something?" But he shook his head, saying, "I'd like to, but I promised Mom first, and she seems to be waiting for me outside." I was taken aback and rushed to the entrance in my pajamas. Looking through the window, I saw my mother-in-law's bright red car parked outside. Noticing my gaze, she stepped out of the car, smiling slyly, and said, "Bob, you're taking too long." "Oh, Catherine, still sleeping at this hour even though you're a stay-at-home wife. That's pretty lazy of you. Should I get you an alarm clock as a gift?" With her lips as red as her car, she laughed out loud, then lovingly took my husband's hand and led him to the passenger seat. I was dumbstruck, watching their intimate interaction, and could only watch as they drove away cheerfully. After this incident, I started noticing changes in my husband. He almost stopped doing household chores, which he used to do regularly, and began visiting his parents' house almost every weekend. His attitude towards me changed and became more demanding. "You're too lazy, Catherine. Whenever I'm off, you just sleep in. Do you think you're fulfilling your duties as a housewife? You even stopped wearing makeup. Just because you're married doesn't mean you should get sloppy. Even Mom's concerned about you. Maybe you should visit your parents sometimes." I don't know what my mother-in-law says about me, but my husband surely is taking advantage of that. He never complained about my naps or makeup when we were dating, but as my husband suggests, maybe my mother-in-law is genuinely concerned about my behavior. But considering how my mother-in-law treats my husband like her boyfriend, I can't help but think that she's just trying to annoy me. I hoped things would change once we had a child. Not long after, I started having doubts about my husband. I found out I was pregnant. My husband was ecstatic, his eyes shining with joy, as he held my hand, promising that we would face this pregnancy together. However, my mother-in-law's harassment only intensified. She would call my husband for trivial things like shopping, going to the doctor, or cleaning her house, leaving me, pregnant, all by myself. I tried explaining to my husband that her actions had a malicious intent towards me, but it backfired. Suddenly furious, he said, "Every time we meet, Mom talks about you, saying you should go to your parents or take some time for yourself. Getting mad like this will affect our baby. Just accept Mom's care and concern." From then on, he often left me alone. As days went by, my morning sickness got worse, and I expressed my desire for him to be with me as much as possible. However, he replied, "What can I do? Even if I'm with you, Mom also wanted to be alone when she was pregnant and didn't even want to see Dad." Feeling physically and mentally drained, I decided to face this battle on my own. Furthermore, on a day when we were out shopping for baby items, we bumped into one of my husband's colleagues unexpectedly. He said to me, "I heard Bob's been actively attending parenting classes. Your bookshelf at home is filled with parenting books, right? He's gonna be a great dad for sure, shopping with his wife today. Can't wait for your baby to arrive." Surprised, I inadvertently blurted out, "What?" Bob quickly jumped in with a sheepish grin, saying, "Come on, stop that." Apparently, he'd been portraying himself as an enthusiastic soon-to-be dad at work, even making up stories. Although I stayed silent to avoid an argument, I felt my anger boiling inside. Ever since, he continued to prioritize errands with his mother-in-law, and occasionally, when we would meet his colleagues, they would always say, "Catherine, you've got yourself a dream husband," with a hint of envy. This kind of behavior built up over time, and I started to distrust Bob's actions and words. I can't say for sure if this stress was the trigger, but one weekend while I was making lunch, I noticed my pants were wet. A thought crossed my mind, and I immediately ran to the bathroom, fearing my water had broken. I shouted across the house where Bob was still asleep, telling him to get the car ready ASAP. Bob, initially groggy, quickly realized the situation and turned pale, rushing to my side to help me walk. I had been told by the nurse multiple times to head straight to the hospital if my water broke. Understanding the potential urgency of the situation, Bob was starting to panic as we were finally in the car and on our way, and I was beginning to feel contractions. Bob's phone rang, but he couldn't pick up since he was driving, so I, fighting through the pain, glanced at the screen. A sinking feeling washed over me when I saw the name Linda, his mother. Staring at the screen for a while, the ringtone persisted. Thinking it might be faster to just answer and explain, I reluctantly picked up. "Bob, where are you? You remember today is our weekly knitting class, right? Did you forget?" I shivered at the cloying voice she never used when speaking with me, but I decided to explain it to my mother-in-law. "The thing is, my water just broke, and I'm on my way to the hospital with Bob." As soon as I said that, my mother-in-law started yelling at me like she was a different person. "What's that got to do with me? Don't use my son as your personal taxi service. Can I speak to Bobby? I've got my weekly sewing class today after all, and I had this planned first." I was at a loss for words. Not only did she not care about her grandchild's welfare, but she also said she didn't care. Even when I remained silent, I could still hear her shrill voice. "I'm sorry, Catherine," my husband quietly said. For a moment, I thought he was apologizing to me for his mother's outburst, but then I noticed he was opening the door to the back seat where I was lying down. I had no idea what he meant, and the pain was so intense that I was just dumbfounded. He then said, "I promised to drop off my mom. So can you call a taxi or an ambulance from here? I'll catch up with you, promise. So with that being said, hold on a second. You're prioritizing her sewing class over your own child. I can't convince her. So you've got to talk to her. It's getting more painful. We need to hurry. I raised my voice since I was running out of patience, but my husband grimaced and said, "It's a weekly thing. Can't be helped, right? I'm sorry I forgot to tell you about it. Here's some money. Try to manage with this." He took out $20 from his wallet and shoved it into my purse. Then he went back to the driver's seat, and without hesitation, he drove off, leaving me behind. This can't be real. I was left not far from our home. Given the neighbors might see, I quickly looked up a taxi service. Meanwhile, I could feel the amniotic fluid flowing between my legs, panicking at the thought of our baby's safety. Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled with my phone. Neither the baby nor I did anything to deserve this. "Catherine." Suddenly, I heard my name called out. I turned around and saw a familiar face. "You look so pale. No time to chat. Get in the car now." This kind person helped me into the back seat of their car. Her husband adjusted the front seat for me. The rest was a blur. As soon as we arrived at the main hospital, they wheeled me into a room prepared by the nurses. I was in so much pain that I was groaning, but I was told I still had some time before giving birth and should rest. The pain was so intense that at times I felt like passing out. Suddenly, my phone rang. I thought it might be my mother returning my call, but it turned out to be my husband. Looking at the clock, it was already late afternoon. Nearly 3 hours had passed, and I was appalled that he was just now arriving at the hospital. I decided not to answer, but he kept calling. So irritated, I picked up. "Catherine, help me. I need you to explain the situation for me." It would have been nice if he'd at least shown some concern for me. I don't know what's happening to my husband, but for him to ask for help, even if he was about to be eaten by an alligator, there's no obligation on my part after he abandoned our child to help him. "Who do you think you are?" I shouted at my husband over the phone and hung up. A little while later, I went into labor alone. It would have been nice to have a dependable husband by my side at a time like this. But if a clueless husband who can't even prioritize is around, it might be better if he weren't there. Instead, I had the support of a kind nurse, and late that night, my long-awaited baby was born. Both the baby and I were safe after the birth, and I was so exhausted that I fell asleep right away. The first thing the next morning, the nurse came into my room and told me that my husband had arrived. Apparently, he had come right after the birth, but since I was in such a deep sleep, the nurse kindly sent him away. Honestly, I thought I'd never want to see him again. But when he entered the room looking all gaunt, I couldn't help but ask what had happened. The previous day, the neighborly older lady who had always gotten along with me picked me up when I was in distress and took me to the hospital. Because her son was around my age, she always took care of me as if I were her own daughter. She had been my pillar of support when I was newlywed and feeling insecure. When she asked about my husband in the car, I told her he was dropping off his mother for her hobby classes. She got furious on my behalf. I had no idea that her anger would push him to the edge. After she dropped me off at the hospital, she apparently spread the word throughout the neighborhood. Given that she was the head of the local community association, she had a lot of influence, and her friends confronted my husband en masse. It seems the situation was so chaotic that there were rubberneckers gathering around our house, asking for my help. In that situation clearly showed his lack of intelligence. I hadn't received a single call from my mother-in-law, and I had already made up my mind. "Can you please leave? I'm not feeling well, and my parents will be here soon. They know about this, right? I want to apologize. Can I stay?" My husband mumbled in a pitiful tone. "What? I don't care if you want to apologize. I'll be busy, so leave." "Please don't say that. By the way, where's our baby? Let me see him once, and then I'll leave. Just go. There are other expecting mothers here, so get out." Even after my cold response, he stayed. So I ignored him, turned my back, and pulled the covers over myself. "Hey, I'm sorry. Can you at least call my mom?" I want to send her a picture of the baby. Should I call a nurse? My husband reached out and shook me. I couldn't stand it anymore and was about to push him away when, "What are you doing? Don't touch her." My parents had just entered the room. My mom rushed to my side, pushing my husband away. "How dare you shake a woman who's just given birth? And after what you did, how dare you show your face here? I'm so disappointed in you. Get out now." Even I had never seen my mom so furious. My husband was intimidated and finally left the room. My dad followed him out, and I'm sure he gave him a good scolding. I refused to see my husband during my hospital stay. After I was discharged, I took the baby and went to my parents' house. Afraid that he might do something, I brought up the idea of divorce over the phone. From now on, I'll be proceeding with the divorce through a lawyer. I informed him about the claim for damages. I completely ignored any objections from him. By the way, the damages I'm referring to are the scratches and bruises I got when he forcefully pulled me out of the car. He tried to make some excuses, but I told him I have testimony from the neighborhood lady and her husband along with photos of the injuries from that day. He then kept silent. My lawyer mentioned that since this was a gross misconduct toward a pregnant woman, the compensation might be substantial. While I was busy taking care of the baby, my mother-in-law Susan once stormed into my family home. The rumors spread by Catherine didn't die down easily, and the looks from the neighbors were chilly. Apparently, she was blaming all of this on me for not respecting their family. However, my intimidating father handled everything. With both mother and son driven away by my dad, I sometimes thought maybe we should have done this from the start. But my dad said the head of a family doesn't just easily step into the limelight, trying to sound all cool about it. Once I got the hang of parenting, I invited the neighborhood lady to my home and introduced her to my parents. She quickly became friends with my mom since they were of the same age, and they decided to keep in touch. The neighborhood lady shared a story she heard from a friend who works part-time at my ex-husband's company. This friend, like her, enjoys gossip and seems to have blabbed about the ex's story to others at some point. The tale spread like wildfire and got exaggerated along the way, and his reputation took a huge hit. Given that he had been posing as a devoted new dad and husband, the backlash was severe. He ended up being looked down upon by bosses and coworkers, leading him to quit his job. Approaching 30, jobless, and without any professional certifications, he seemed to be living modestly, relying on his mother's retirement funds and savings, becoming somewhat of a recluse due to the community's judgment. A few years later, I got a call from him, whom I had almost forgotten about. "Hey, where are you? I'm outside your family home right now." His rude greeting prompted me to respond in kind. "I've moved." "What do you want?" "You moved." "Living it up with the compensation money I gave you, huh? Must be nice. Come back right now. Let's start over. Mom wants to see you too." His ramblings made no sense. "Why would I go back to you? Are you still going on about Mom after all this time? Don't call me again. I don't want to hear it." I hung up without waiting for a response, and for a while, my phone kept ringing. When I finally managed to block his calls, he began flooding me with texts, begging for reconciliation. I read them just to be sure, but they were filled with nonsense like, "Don't you think it's sad for a child not to have a father? And even though you owe so much to Mom, not letting her see the child is utterly disrespectful." I deleted all of them and changed my email address. Though this whole incident was a nightmare, it allowed me to proceed with the divorce advantageously and take appropriate action against him. If a family member is going to be such trash, it's better for my child that they're not in our lives. I find comfort in this thought as I enjoy parenting, supported by my parents who have now become loving grandparents.